Okay. I see we have some people joining. Nice. Okay. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Sam. I'm Payzaar's head of marketing. I'm here with Trevor, who is one of the co-founders of the company. He's our COO. Before we get started, I just wanted to talk you a little bit through about how the session is going to go, and then we'll get into the presentation part. So as we do with all of our webinars, we're recording this. We'll be able to share this with all of you afterwards. So if you have colleagues, coworkers, if your boss, someone on your team is interested in learning a little bit more about Payzaar and about the things that we do, you can share this with them. And on that note, what I will say is, if you haven't seen this before, I would very strongly recommend you check out our YouTube channel, because we have a ton of webinars and a ton of content that we put up there. We have Plug and Pay, which is our global payroll focused talk show, and where we've interviewed a lot of interesting global payroll leaders about topics that are interesting in the industry. So if you're interested in payroll content, I would strongly recommend you go check that out, because there's a lot of interesting resources there. That's the first thing. The second thing I will say is that we like to make these sessions as interactive as possible. And what you will see is at the bottom of your screen, you have a Q&A tab, you have a chat there. If at any point during the session you have any questions, you can just pop those into the Q&A tab, and Trevor and I will try to pick them up as we go along. Okay. And that's pretty much it for the housekeeping stuff. So if it's okay with you, Trevor, we'll get rolling.
Let's go. Yeah, looking forward to this, Sam. Thank you.
Nice. Okay. So the first thing we wanted to talk about, and I mean, the topic of the webinar today is how you can accelerate or how you can save time on global payroll, on repetitive global tasks that are part of your global payroll process, right? And before we get into that, the question I wanted to ask is, so what do global payroll teams spend the most time on? We've had a lot of conversations with payroll leaders over the years, and what we'll find is different people in different teams and different companies have different priorities. But the one thing that they all mention when we ask this question is data management. And by data management, what I mean is everything that involves working with payroll data. So all the different data preparation tasks that they need to do to run payroll, checking and validating their gross to net, compiling data for reporting and for stakeholder requests. It's always about data, essentially. The figure that we hear quoted very often is, in this context, is 60%. As in, payroll teams spend around 60% of their time managing data. Performing those tasks I just mentioned, or others that are also related to payroll data, essentially. I know that every team and every payroll leader's experience is going to be slightly different. In some organizations, it's going to be 50% of their time, and some organizations, it's going to be 75% of their time. But across the board, that's always the biggest time block. And I think this ties in nicely to the next thing we want to talk about, which is, what does the payroll process look like? So Trevor, do you have anything to say?
Let me take a swing at this. So I suppose if you want to understand how do we save time and how do we become more efficient, we need to take a look at our overall payroll process. And we've divided this into two distinct kind of phases. One is around data preparation. So think about that up to the point that payroll is approved. And then our post-calculation activities that we spend time on. And when we take a look at that, I say, well, look, how hard can it be to gather data and get it to where it needs to be and get payroll approved? Like, payroll is a fairly, should be a fairly hand cranked type operation, but it kind of belies the fact that when you start to scratch under some of those bubbles in the rectangle on the left hand side, there's an awful lot of work, and it's down to the complexity of the organization and the complexity of the data stores within the organization that store data that impact our payroll changes. So if we think about gathering data, we think about organization will say, well, look, I'm covered because, you know, I have all my data in a HR system. Well, that's great until you start to pick away at the edges and you start to talk to people and you maybe get into some variable pay elements and say, well, look, does your HR system store actual bonus calculations, actual equity, actual commissions? And no, they don't. They're great at storing things to say that Trevor's entitled to a commission or Trevor's entitled to a bonus, but what payout should be and when is generally stored elsewhere. We know sales commissions, for example, are lots of fun. And then you have kind of global systems that might manage things like global benefits, but then you've local benefits. You know, what's my health insurance premium that I need to communicate to my payroll provider in a particular country? And it just goes on and on. There's equity, there's expenses. Some countries you might pay expenses through the finance system, others might just go through payroll. And all of this becomes increasingly more complicated when we start to think about you know, the organization start to expand and change where it operates, and how do we capture those, and how do we pull those into a nice tidy payroll change data gathering type process. And that doesn't mention, you know, think about any of the urgent last minute changes, leave or severance deals, or things that are just, you know, have to be put through payroll. And all of this happens in a very intensive kind of phase because, you know, especially some of you that might be working with traditional global payroll aggregation providers, you might have very early cutoffs in the month that you have to get payroll done by. And that just really intensifies this process. So I suppose there's just a school of thought out there that, look, if I have an API of everything sorted, the reality is when you start to look at your inputs, your global inputs held in some global systems, local inputs held in local countries that you need to get back to communicate to your providers, and all of the different systems that you store around the place, really, it's quite a complex and labor-intensive type exercise. Now, once you have your data together, you move into the second box here, which is, now I have it, I've collated what my changes are, I'm up against the cutoff date, I now need to start to transform that. And I need to change that into a format that the payroll providers need. You know, again, what we have in here is, because of the different market positions that maybe solutions like HR, time systems, benefit systems, etc., they've all been developed with a particular use case in mind to manage HR data, to manage time data, etc. They're not really thinking about managing payroll data. Whereas payroll providers are saying, it's great that you've all of these systems, but really, you need to give me to pay people accurately and on time, you need to give me this data in a format that I can consume. And this then, the first bit, there's a lot of manual intervention in the first bit. Then you're recoding the data to format it for the provider. So then, again, there's manual intervention there. And this is kind of risky. And again, there's a few people that I know outside of payroll that work to the kind of benchmark that I see payroll teams working to, which is the expectation of doing an okay job is everyone gets paid right, on time, and every time. The benchmark is 100% timeliness, right? So we have a lot of manual intervention going on here, and then we need to validate the changes, potentially put it through an internal release process or an internal approval process, and that then gets handed over to our provider. A provider then runs their calculation. The provider runs a calculation, and again, there's a little bit of work that needs to be done on the provider side, because it's not clean on the provider side either, right? Because the provider is now potentially working in a global model. You know, they're a local provider that's working with one of the large global payroll providers, traditional aggregators. And they have to shoehorn the format that the global provider gives them, right, to get into their system. So, you know, my understanding is a lot of the time that integration isn't very tight. It's actually someone at the end of a system downloading data, dragging and dropping it, and manually entering it into a local payroll engine to calculate payroll. And that's why when we talk to customers, they spend an awful lot of time checking what's being calculated by the provider. So if you think about the effort that's going in here, we're gathering data together from lots of disparate systems, manually trying to piece it together. We're then reformatting it to send it to the provider. There's risk in that. And we then take the data, the gross to net data, the calculated payroll data back, and we start checking that. And in some companies, I know they check employee by employee, pay element by pay element to make sure it's right, because of all of the manual intervention that's going on, both with internally in the company gathering the data, and also the manual intervention provided by the payroll provider, there's room for mistake, and our benchmark is 100% right all of the time. So now we've got to a point through this process, very labor intensive, lots of checking, lots of over processing, lots of opportunity actually to automate in here actually, but we don't have it yet. And we get past payroll calculation, and then we're into breathe a sigh of relief, and now we're trying to make sure that our filings are filed on time. We're thinking about our general ledger journal entry and our payroll accounting. And depending on the number of formats you're getting your general ledger journal entry information back, that might be coming back to you. It might not balance. You need to check it. You need then to potentially format that to get it into your finance system. And increasingly, businesses are moving to a tighter month-end close. So again, now you're under pressure to make sure everything's ready to hit that, end of month plus 2 business days to complete your close your books for the month for accounting purposes. So when all of this is happening, then if we think about the reporting dimension on this, the data you might be getting back, your payroll gross and net data from the local systems, from your global aggregator, might not necessarily be in the most usable or user-friendly format, and you're getting lots of requests from around the business to say, hey, can you give me a view on the cost of employment, the employer contribution side of that in country X, country Y, country Z? Can you tell me what we've spent on commissions, bonuses, overtime across this region, this set of countries globally over the last period of time? And you might be trying to hot stitch that together from lots of different formats, lots of different pay elements, and you might not necessarily have a global view of that data, and that becomes hard. And actually, the business gets a little bit fatigued. And you might find they just stop asking you for this insight, because they know it's going to be hard. And by the time you've actually serviced their requests, it's kind of too late. They've moved on. And that opportunity, I think, for payroll to influence and to support decision making around the business is potentially lost. So from my perspective, when I look at both of these phases, both the pre-payroll calculation phase, lots of opportunities to reduce kind of needless checking and things. And maybe by reducing that as well, we might think about how that might, make our jobs a little bit more fun. And then in post-calculation stage, we think about how we might save time by having data more readily available, that we can do fun things, maybe like, get involved in decision-making and getting driving insight from the data we have. So I think to kind of understand where the savings are made, we really need to dig into these boxes and look for those opportunities.
Okay, thanks. So moving on, why do payroll teams spend so much time on data management? And Trevor got into some of the details here quite a bit, and we'll get into that. We're actually going to get into the details even more as we move forward. But basically, the way I view it and the way I like to summarize it is, one, just because that's just the way payroll is, and of course that elicits the question: is that how it should be? 2, because it's hard to automate due to fragmentation, and 3, because of technology. The first point is obviously related to the fact that payroll is an admin function. So the expectation of the organization is that the work gets done, and as long as it gets done well, they don't really care so much how you are doing it, right? So if the payroll team is spending hours doing manual data preparation and stuff like that, then that's fine. That's just how it is, right? And then the question, of course, is, well, should it be like that? If you can do something significantly faster, and if that frees up time for your team to work on other things that aren't getting the attention they deserve because you're spread too thin, well, then you should do that, right? the second point about fragmentation has to do with the fact of, with the reality of what the payroll landscape looks like for most multinational organizations, right? So some organizations are very mature, they're very consolidated, they're very modern, they have, top of the line systems in place, their processes are super optimized, everything is consolidated, they have great governance, blah, blah, blah. But they're a minority. That's not what most organizations look like. And we know this because we work with them and we talk to hundreds of organizations, and we see what it's like for them. For most organizations, they're going to have a big mix of vendors. They're going to have lots of different vendors in different regions and different countries. They're going to have lots of different software systems supporting the activities of those vendors. So you have that fragmentation. And then what happens is that the job of the global payroll team is actually to tie all those things together. And that'll mean typically, spending a lot of time working in spreadsheets, manipulating data, consolidating, aggregating, standardizing, et cetera, et cetera. And a lot of it's being done by hand. There's a lot of work that could be automated or that could be mediated by software that is done by hand. And of course, that's hugely time consuming, right? So if you didn't have to do this by hand, you would be saving a lot of time by default. And the last reason I would give relates to technology capabilities, right? So a lot of legacy payroll systems are not really designed to give you that kind of consolidation because they're built with, they're built with a hyperlocal mindset, right? They're not built to consolidate or to be able to marry different types of data together. So there is a lack of strong technology solutions that can really tie all these things together. So the global payroll team is not doing that work by hand, basically.
I was going to come in on I was going to come in on a couple of those points, Sam, because I think you make some really, really good points here. On point 2 about fragmentation, I meet so few organizations that have high degrees of data discipline. And it's not that it's by design that it appears somewhat chaotic. It's just the reality of how organizations evolve, right? So if an organization is doing really well, the likelihood is it's competing for talent. So it's adding things to the employee value proposition to attract people to the business. So, pay elements, systems, etc., to attract those talents, benefits, etc., are being added quickly because to support growth, you need talent. That growth then comes with, some complexity of their own. Now we're in new countries, and look, no one is going to say we're not going to do this expansion to win this business or to set up this operation center by first consulting payroll. Payroll is there as a support function to enable the business. So it will follow where the business goes, of course. And I suppose what activities like that mean is that the nice clean payroll process that someone might have in their head today to get to that nirvana is not the reality. It's always going to be somewhat, chaotic is probably a strong word, but dynamic, to reflect that the organization itself is dynamic. The organization is stretching, is expanding internationally. And then, you know what? You have a nice laid out payroll process. You're on top of that international expansion. And next thing you know, someone taps on your door and says, we've just done an acquisition. We have 27 more countries with 2,500 employees that are onboarding with us in 90 days' time. We need to get that sorted. So that fragmentation, the best laid plans, survive. I think it was Eisenhower said that, a plan survives 5 minutes contact with the enemy, right? So that's just the organization is in a natural state of flow. Payroll is in a dynamic state. Its default state is one of flux, and that leads to fragmentation. Not that people in payroll don't understand the downside of that. It's just how the organization evolves. And that, I think, brings us into how do you, there's a question around this and how do we save time and become more efficient, etc. We need things that help us to be agile in that dynamic environment.
Before we move on, I just want to jump in with it. There's an alternative quote that I really like, which is the Mike Tyson quote, which everyone has a plan until they get like that.
Get punched in the face. No, it's true.
Exactly.
It's true. Yeah. And look, the other point here is, And again, this is a reality of the technology we buy. No one has a single solution for global payroll that covers every country everywhere, right? You know, what there's lots of underlying local payroll engines to support the production of payroll. And no one then has this all-encompassing system that contains all of the data that could possibly be required in all of those countries to accurately calculate payroll. And that's because payroll folks develop payroll engine with a payroll headset and a payroll mindset and go, give me this data, I can calculate payroll. I don't need all of this stuff that might be in a HR system like performance or succession planning or any of those fun things around employee engagement. I don't need any of that stuff, right? And the HR folks can go, well, that's our main stuff. This is where we make our bread and butter. But maybe not everything that you need to run payroll sits in there. And that's just, again, we've lots of actors that are involved in this ecosystem of technology to get people paid, but there's no one source that does everything from my changes all the way through. And it's very unlikely that, you know, organizations, especially as they get a little bit bigger and expand internationally, that they maintain those data disciplines. Because they're selecting solutions to help them to grow, and growth being the primary objective of all organizations. So they're not thinking about a smooth payroll process first, they're thinking about growth first. So that means I select all of these different systems to do different things and help me with these point problems. And that's going to lead to this, these limitations around technology as well. And that's just it's part of just the evolution of the organization influences that. So again, these things are you know, they're challenges, but they're also realities. We just need to live with them.
Yeah. Moving on, I'd like to actually look into talk a little bit about what this fragmentation looks like, right? So this is kind of an approximation of what a payroll environment is going to look like for a lot of multinational organizations. Of course, this is simplified. It's not going to match. It's not going to be 100% match for everyone. Every payroll is different. So there's a lot of nuance, obviously, but I think it's a good approximation, right? So for most multinationals, what you're going to have is you're going to have a mix of different providers. You're going to have some payrolls, you know, you're going to have maybe your headquarters are in the US, that's where you started out. So you're doing the US in-house, and then you have a provider for LATAM, and it's going to be Brazil, but maybe also Argentina and Colombia and Chile. And then you're going to have a provider for Europe, and you're going to have Spain, Germany, Poland, and the Netherlands with that provider. And then maybe you have another provider for a different part of Eastern Europe. And then maybe you have a provider for South Asia, which is India, et cetera, right? And the result of this is that all of these providers operate slightly differently. Of course, the stuff that you're doing in-house, you do it with your own process and your own systems. But you're going to have different data formats. You're going to have a different data model. So the columns in your spreadsheet are going to be different in each location. The cutoff dates and the actual back and forth process, the workflow that you use to produce payroll for each of these countries are going to be slightly different. And then what's going to happen is you're going to have, as Trevor mentioned earlier, even if you have an HCM, even if you have Workday or whatever it is, typically you're going to have more adjacent systems that also feed into that. So maybe you have something for time and attendance, maybe you have a system for your bonuses and your commissions, expenses, benefits, et cetera, et cetera. And typically it's not going to be exactly the same in each one of your countries. So what happens is you have all of these different systems and subsystems across all of these different countries, and they're all generating different types of outputs. And then it's your job to take those outputs and aggregate them and put them together in a way that makes sense, right? And yeah, so you're dealing with siloed information. You're dealing with, you know, poor integration with HR and finance environments or HR and finance systems, because everything is so fragmented, and you have to do a lot of prep work to make it compatible so it can feed into those systems. Of course, you're dealing with different processes. And as I said, you know, your data is going to look different from one place to another.
Good.
Trevor.
Sure. So a solution to this reality of fragmented systems. So fragmented source systems that contain like payroll change information, fragmented payroll calculation engines, even if they are kind of held with a traditional global provider, is a payroll control layer. What we like to kind of think about when we're dealing with the reality, right? So change and a dynamic organization being a reality, international expansion being a reality, pay element changes, new benefits, new employee value propositions being a reality. The next acquisition is a reality. So we need to just accept this multiplicity of data sources and data targets. So we need to, accept that, things are going to change. So there's a school of thought out there that, I think I can understand it. It's around, okay, I have an API to my HR information system. Everything is going to be fine, right? But unfortunately, it's not the case. And really what we need to think about is a control layer as a set of tools that allow us to bring together our people, our own internal people within the organization, our partners, and our data, and to drive some automation around that, to unify these different actors to get ourselves to a cohesive payroll experience. And we're building the Payzaar payroll control tower, with a control layer with those kind of philosophies and those realities in mind. By looking at ways and saying, look, if we've lots of different data sources, our problem here is not getting the data. Our problem is gathering it, validating it, and transforming it, augmenting it, so that the data we do have, we're not trying to manually slice this stuff together. We let the system do that. Just link it up in the system, let the system do that, right? We're able to check that data before it goes out. So anomaly detection, validation detection, change detection, so that, rather than having to check everything, we're checking what's important. So we're reducing that waste in the system. That we can consolidate data in a single platform from around the world to drive your reporting requirements. So to give your colleagues, rather than asking you to what did we spend on commission across this region or globally in the last 6 months, that you can actually put tools in front of them to say, hey, so this is our data, this is organizational data. We happen to hold the cleanest data about the biggest cost base in the business and payroll. We found some tools here to let you self-serve, and that data is available as soon as payroll's approved. So your business partners in the business units or regional regional centers or the corporate HQ, they're not getting frustrated waiting for you to spend 2 weeks to hot stitch something together from a bunch of different formats. You figured out a way to get them that data instantaneously. And because your data is in one place now, you can move to a faster year-end close. Again, for 70% of your cost base in most businesses, labor is 70, typically 60 to 70% of your cost base. So the pressure around month-end close starts to reduce by having your people, data, and systems all operating cohesively within these control layers. And the key thing around this is that, to select something that's agile, and I keep going back to it, the business keeps moving. You need tools that are agile. You don't need things that are going to take an age to implement, that are hard to use, and that your payroll providers find hard to use. You need tools that are able to accommodate with new payrolls, new countries quickly, new pay elements, no problem. Acquisitions, let's onboard those and let's understand what's happening in those payroll processes, and let's help to standardize them. So I think by aggregating your people, process, and data all in a global payroll control layer, you can get to those standardized processes. You get to that central governance, visibility, and control. You can bring a high degree of automation in terms of your workflow processes, and start to eliminate an awful lot of this manual data manipulation, which brings with it the risk of inaccuracy, and let technology start to check your data, drive your reporting, and have that more integrated data management utility together. So so you're delivering a better service into the business, but a less manually intensive service into the business. So it starts to become a nicer place for people in the payroll team to work.
Yeah, I'll just jump in with a couple examples because Trevor, you mentioned something about reporting, and there's two examples that we have that I think are really relevant. So one of our customers is a very large organization. They have, I think they're present in around 60 countries. They have around 20,000 employees. And they use us specifically for reporting and for integration with finance to generate their GLs. And the reporting thing is very interesting when it comes to the actual, time saving element of it, because before in the past, what would happen to them is the global payroll team, the leader of the global payroll team, they receive a request from their chief accounting officer or from someone in finance or something like that, saying, I need you to produce me a report of, these pay elements, or look at these divisions in these countries or something like that. And they would say, okay, I can do that for you, but it's going to take me a week and a half. Or depending on the complexity of the request, they would say, I can't do it. I can't do it because, and these are his words, this is our customer's words. He said, the problem with payroll data is that there is too much data. We have too much of it. In an organization their size, where they're present in 60 countries and they have 20,000 employees, they have just this enormous mountain of data. And if you imagine the differences that you're going to have in pay elements and structure from across all of these countries, it's massive.
Language, local currency, exchange rate, there's no standard. Payroll is hyper local, right?
Yeah. So they would get these requests that would come in, their stakeholders would come and say, I need you to produce this report for me. And they'd say, I can't do that for you, because if I do that for you, I'm not going to hit my cutoff date, because I have to hit my cutoff date for this, and it's in a week, and compiling all that's going to take me dozens of hours of work. So I can't do it. And obviously this was a point of friction and blah, blah, blah. And the short of it is by aggregating all their data, by being able to consume all their data and have it in this platform, they can query it in real time. Basically, the data becomes super, super accessible, and they can just pull it whenever they want. And the other example I would give, which also relates to reporting, is that another customer that we work with, what has happened is that the use of the platform has extended beyond the global payroll team. So there are people in finance and accounting and in rewards and other departments who are using it, and they go into it and they query data themselves.
Yeah, look, it's a great example. It's, again, you've put manners on your payroll process. You've the data in one place, and now you can push that out to people that should be entitled to consume that data to drive decision making, without them asking you, hey, can you build me a report that contains X, Y, and Z? And we all know what that loop looks like. And can you put this on? And I forgot to ask you for this. And next thing you know, there's this tick-tack backwards and forwards. Push those self-service tools out into the organization. Now, the data, of course, is secure and access is controlled, and all of those things need to happen. But again, it's a great way for the payroll team to add value in the organization by enabling their business partners.
So Trevor, why don't we move on a little bit, and maybe we can talk about how the software dimension of this, how it can produce those kind of concrete time savings and all of that we've been talking about.
Sure. So if I think about kind of the characteristics of tools to help to save time, right? Because we've spoken about the realities. Payroll landscape is complex. Lots of payroll change data sources scattered around the organization, locally and globally. Lots of different target formats to push the data into payroll. Lots of formats coming back to drive reporting, etc. And the reality is, it's not going to get any easier, folks. It's going to get more complex, right? And faced with that complexity, what are your choices? I'm going to work harder, longer hours. I'm going to hire more people into my team, which is great. We expand our team a little bit, but we've got to ask ourselves the question with the kind of work we're asking these people to do all of the time, right? Is there a better way to work? And I think what you need to look for is you need to look for some tools that will help you to gather and augment that data, do it efficiently, so that, once you have it in one place, it's automatically transformed into what the provider in country X needs. That really helps the provider as well, right? So there's two sides of this. It's not just from a consumer of payroll services, I throw the problem over the fence to the provider. Because ultimately, if that kind of approach is happening, it's fraught with risk, lots of manual intervention. You're setting the provider up for failure as well, because stuff is coming at them in all sorts of unstructured formats. And out of that, then you'll spend more time even checking when you get the results back, right? So we need these tools that work cohesively with the actors in the payroll process, with your in-house payroll teams, with your payroll providers where you have them, so that the tools are helping both parties to succeed. Because again, guess what? Our benchmark, I keep going back to it, 100% right, on time, every time. And we need technology and tools to help us with that. And we need to reduce the amount of needless checking that we're doing, because that work is, people get fatigued, people miss mistakes, and it's ideal for technology to do. I know personally, checking and rechecking, it's not something that necessarily gets me fired up to do. I'll do it, but I'm not necessarily fired up to do it, right? But software technology algorithms are out there to do that and to help us with that. And again, we made the point a little bit earlier about self-serviceability, and helping the business be smarter by putting information that you gather that you're the custodians of into their hands to help drive business success. And the key thing with these tools is to find tools that reflect the reality of the organization. The organization is dynamic. The organization is agile. Payroll needs to be agile, and you need a set of tools that are able to help you with that. Now, maybe, Sam, I don't know if I can maybe just chat for, just a couple of examples about how we help our customers with that. Okay. So we've some great features in our platform. Our HR Connect feature is designed to help you pull your data together, to automatically combine it, to transform it, to validate your data, error detection, change detection, and to give you that high degree of automation that is reducing lots of manual effort. And that's just one use case. And I think Matt is going to show us some pieces like that in a few moments. Our workflow, if you choose to use our workflow, is bringing together your different actors in your payroll process. All your communication is in one place. You don't have to go searching for who sent what instruction to who when. And it's a dynamic workflow that's integrating your data preparation pieces. It's integrating your payroll approval. It's bringing automation around that. Our reporting is very successful. Sam gave you a couple of examples of some of how our customers are using that to push self-service out into your organization, to answer questions that the business partners of the payroll team, of the global payroll team, are asking, and also then to help facilitate management of the month-end process of getting your general ledger information into your finance systems automatically, but also having that central hub to manage all of your GLs. You're not trying to manage different formats coming in from lots of different vendors. You have one central hub to manage that. Shortly, and I know Sam is going to talk about it in a moment, we're going to be launching our data validation features, where you develop some algorithms to make that checking even smarter and faster, so that input to output checking. Again, this whole industry of checking, if anyone on the call has been through any lean training, or there's a waste, there's different there's different levels of waste that are kind of characterized through the lean process, and over processing, and we're massively guilty of that in the payroll industry. So over processing, over checking. So I'm checking stuff that should be right. That is, that it just cuts against kind of lean process, and it's illogical when you think about it. Why should I be checking something that just should be right? It's a waste of my time. So those things like we're bringing forward shortly that I think will be a game changer. But they're just some of the things that we have on our platform that I think, help us with this agile, dynamic, moving organization and help to support the reality that our colleagues are faced in payroll every pay cycle.
Yeah, I'd just like to make one more point. In addition to what Trevor was mentioning, which to kind of drive it home, which is why these efficiency gains matter, right? So in the end, what we're talking about is we're talking about saving time. We're talking about ways to do what you're doing, but doing it faster so you're more efficient, so you're dedicating less time to it, right? So let's say you have a team of 3 people, they work 40 hours each, that's 120 hours a week, which, 4 weeks a month, that's 480 hours a month, right? We can round that up to 500 because it's a nice even number. Let's pretend no one does overtime just to keep things clean, right? So they're doing 500 hours a month collectively, right? If your team is dedicating 60% of their time to data management processes, which is the number that we talked about at the beginning, which we've heard from lots of different payroll leaders as kind of a ballpark figure to how much time they dedicate to data management, that means they're dedicating 300 hours a month to these kinds of activities, right? So they're dedicating 300 hours a month to preparing spreadsheets, to checking and double checking outputs from their providers, for compiling data and aggregating data for stakeholder requests, et cetera, right? Let's say you can reduce that by 20%, right? That's 60 hours less. You're spending 60 hours less on these types of data preparation tasks, which is a week and a half of one employee's time, right? So 60 hours can be the time you need to stop focusing on the short term and start working on things that you can't do, but that you would like to do because the short term is getting in the way of the long term, right? This is something I relate to, even though I work in marketing, because marketing is cyclical, right? So we have a calendar, we have certain milestones, we have to execute certain things every month, and we have to keep doing these things over and over and over again, right? It's not as complex as payroll, I'll be honest, but it works like that. It works on a cycle, right? And what happens is once you hit cruising altitude, you can't change things. You have to just keep executing over and over and over again, right? So maybe you would like to take a step back and you would say, I'd like to redesign how we work. I'd like our processes I'd like to be more efficient at a process level. It's very difficult to find the time to do that when you're working against deadlines and you just have to keep hitting those milestones over and over again, right? So being able to reduce the time you invest into these types of data management tasks by 20%, hypothetically, could mean that now you have the bandwidth and you have the resources to be more strategic, to work on initiatives that you hadn't been able to focus on because you simply didn't have the time and the resources, right? So yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Super. So where do we go next with this, Sam? I see a question in the chat.
Oh, I see. Okay, I see a question right here. Hi, can we get this? Can we get the slides to this so I can share this with our people ops manager as we're looking? Okay. Yes, we will share this with you. We will share the slides with everyone. As I mentioned at the beginning, we're recording the session. We will send out the recording to everyone tomorrow or on Monday, and we will also send the slides to you for sure.
Right.
Okay, so Matt, do you want to jump in? I'm going to stop sharing my screen now.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Sam. And let me just share my screen. And while I'm doing that, I'll just quickly introduce myself. As Sam said there, my name is Matt. I am the Senior Product Analyst here at Payzaar. And today I'm just going to provide you with an overview of our Payzaar application and how you can get the most out of the application so that you can manage your payroll data more efficiently. So saying that, as Sam and Trevor have just mentioned there, the management of payroll data can take a considerable amount of time. And this can be as mentioned, for a variety of reasons. If the payroll data is checked manually, it can be quite inefficient. It can be due to the human nature aspect, which can result in human error. And of course, as was mentioned, the data can be quite fragmented. Payroll data can come in various formats of different sizes. That's why here at Payzaar, we designed the application in a manner that can aid those involved in the payroll process in the aggregation and management of their payroll data. And this will allow those users to save time at various tasks throughout the pay cycle, freeing up their time so that they can more efficiently get the tasks that are required from them done as accurate as possible. So saying that, a key module that we have within the Payzaar application that can help with the management of data is that of our HR Connect. And our HR Connect module provides an integration between a company's payroll system and a company's HR system. It allows the user to import data that has been received from their HR system, upload this data source into Payzaar, which can then transform it into a format that is accepted by their payroll provider. On the screen here, you're currently looking at that pre-set up pay group within the application. And the core components of our HR Connect module are our data grids. So we have 2 data grids set up here. And so this data grid has been configured in a manner so that the data has already been uploaded by the user into this data grid. And as you can see, the data grid has been set up so that any errors that are contained within the file that has been received from the HR system are easily identifiable and can be rectified by the user by simply just inputting the correct figure where appropriate. And as you can see, the error will be cleared from the point of view of the user. And this is done this way so that before submission to the payroll provider, that this payroll data can be as accurate as possible, which saves the payroll provider time spent having to manually check it themselves, and that they can spend their time more efficiently calculating that payroll data and uploading the gross net file into the system. And this essentially just ensures that the data is correct and as accurate as possible. Because we all know that, as Trevor mentioned earlier, that the payroll data is the most accurate form of data out there, and that it has to be 100% correct all of the time, because every employee in an organization has an interest in ensuring that their payroll data is 100% and as accurate as possible. That's why here at Payzaar, we provide an extensive reporting capability that ensures that if there are any questions that require answering throughout the payroll process, that it can be easily identifiable throughout the system. On the screen at the moment, you're looking at our payroll dashboard. And within our payroll dashboard, we have 4 graphical representations. 3 of these graphs are contained, represent our main group element groupings here within the platform. So those relating to our gross pay elements, those relating to our employer contributions, and those to our employee deductions. We also have a 4th graph on the screen, and this essentially represents a counter so that we can keep track on the amount of employee records that are being uploaded as part of the upload process here within Payzaar. All of this data can be viewed on a month-to-month basis, or it can also be viewed on a quarterly basis and a yearly basis, or if a custom view is required, this can be done as well. And we can also filter between past months, so we can always identify any patterns or trends contained within our data. We can also filter certain regions or certain countries if we require, and this will automatically update all of these graphical representations, as you can see on the screen. We can also drill down all of these graphical representations further so we can get a greater understanding into our payroll data. As you can see, we can identify any comparisons between our payroll gross pay elements and our employer contributions in our payroll costs trend graph. If I scroll down, you can also see that we have some payroll costs by country. So we're able to identify those patterns between on a country by country basis. And it's worth mentioning here that within Payzaar, There is no need for all uploading of gross to net sources to be strictly limited to the English language. If we take our Brazilian pay group, for example, our Brazilian pay group has data sources that contain the local element names in Portuguese. So we can take these local element names, map them to a globally understood tag within the system, while still maintaining that local element name. So that's quite a nice feature that we have. So there's no need for any translation to take place. In addition to this, if there are any changes on a period by period basis across your global payroll data, this can be shown here as well. So for example, in our pay element movement graph, if there happened to be any increase in wages carried out in our current month, if we have any new hires or any leavers throughout the month, this can all be automatically updated when the data source is uploaded into the Payzaar platform. For those who prefer viewing data in a much more tabularized format, we also provide our global payroll data page. And this just provides a comparison between the most recent period and the previous period where data has been uploaded. And a key aspect of this reporting is that we're able to drill down until we get to our pay group level section. So we're able to compare and contrast all of those pay groups and any differences between the two periods. We can also, if the user has employee level access for a specific pay group, we can drill down into that employee level record. So once again, we can really get a consolidated view on all of your global data, which can aid in the managing and maintaining of your payroll data. In addition to everything that I just mentioned there, our graph, which represents our people, can be a helpful supplement to your HR system, as you can easily track, if we drill down further to highlight any patterns or any trends, who is being paid in what country, how much those employee records are being paid, and just who is being paid in comparison to on a country by country basis. So saying all that, our pre-built reporting capabilities within the application can help answer the majority of payroll questions that are being asked. However, for that small, minute questions that may require further analysis, we provide the ability for the user to build their own custom reports. So within our data analyzer section, the user can create custom reports using the data that they want to focus upon. So for example, within our Brazil bonus report here, we're concerned with just elements relating to our bonuses paid out in our Brazilian pay group. We can create reports on a pay group by pay group basis, or if we have employee level access, we can drill those pay group level reports so that we can identify the finer trends that are present throughout the data. And of course, all this data can be viewed in a global currency or a pay group currency, or if you wish to export any of the data from the system, the user can do this as well. And they can export in either the global currency or the pay group currency. In addition to this, we also have our Accounting Connect module contained within our data analyzer section. And this can just help give you further visibility into your operational data. Our Accounting Connect module is essentially a central hub that allows you to manage, maintain that employee records that are contained within your general ledger accounts. The initial setup of your general ledger is very simple. The user will assign codes and indicate which elements represent debits and which elements represent credits. And then the system will take all this information and aggregate your general ledger report for you. As always, with the regular general reporting, you can set up this report so that you're only focusing on the elements that you wish to focus on. You can decide whether you want to view reports in a local description or in a more global view of a description. You can set up an infinite number of group bys. We've set up grouping by department and cost code in our Netherlands general ledger here. And no general ledger would be complete without the inclusion of our debits and our credits. So as you can see on the right-hand side of the screen, our total debits match our total credits. So that ensures that we're able to gain visibility and ensure that our general ledger reporting is done as accurately as possible. As always, you can switch between a global currency and a pay group currency. And if you wish to export any of this data that is shown within the system, you can do so as well in either your global currency or your pay group currency. So saying that, I've provided you with a very brief, very quick, in-depth overview into the reporting capabilities and the key modules that we have here within the Payzaar application. And I hope that you can see that when they are integrated with one another, the Payzaar system can become a very powerful tool, one that can help you manage, maintain, and make the most of your payroll data. So thanks very much for listening. And Sam and Trevor, back to you guys.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks. That was very interesting. So we've been going on for a while. And now I'd like to propose, if anyone has any questions, now would be a good time for us to answer them. So you have the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. If you want to ask us anything, you could pop it in there. And yeah, we'd be happy to chat a little bit more. I'll give that a few seconds.
I have a question, Sam, just to get the ball rolling. How do I get my hands on this Payzaar software then?
I'm not gonna answer that. Sorry. No, joking. You could go to our website. You could send us a message actually. So we don't have any questions coming in. So then what I'll say, because we are also coming up on time now, and I don't want to keep everyone here for too long. What I will say, and Trevor alluded to this earlier, is 1 month from now we're going to be doing another webinar during the first week of April. We're going to be publishing that. We'll be posting it on our social media channels. It'll be on LinkedIn. We'll be sending it out we'll be sharing, promoting it by email to our subscribers. And we're going to be doing a webinar to announce a new feature that we're launching, which is data validation. And I don't want to go too in depth into that now because we could spend another hour talking about that if we did. But it'll be very, very interesting, and it's going to be it'll be one of the critical features that actually allows you to significantly reduce the amount of time you dedicate to manually processing data. That'll be during the first week of April. And we will be publishing news about that on all our social channels over the next few days. So if you're interested, look out for that. And now I actually see we do have a question, which is, how does Payzaar maintain their compliance? And in this context, well, Trevor, do you want to take a shot at that?
Sure, yeah.
How does Payzaar maintain compliance?
So I suppose there's a couple of different dimensions to that. From a compliance perspective, we're ISO 27001 certified, so we're very proud of that at Payzaar. It's a recent certification we've achieved. I think the question is probably more coming from payroll compliance and statutory filings, and just making sure that payroll is kept whole. Well, as we were explaining earlier on, we're a payroll control layer, a global payroll control layer. It works in concert with your local payroll providers. So local compliance is part of the local payroll providers' duties. We have some capability in the platform which shows your compliance posture. So what should be filed where and when across the globe. So we've nice analytics about that, so you know what needs to happen. It's integrated into the workflow with the provider. So that means you can see when your payroll provider has filed what for you, or if indeed you need to complete something for your provider to make filings on your behalf. So it gives you an overview of your compliance posture. The actual filings themselves are generally speaking duty of the local payroll provider. So hopefully that answers that compliance question.
Okay. Do we have any other questions? Okay, I see another one. What is the benefit of using Payzaar as a layover tool over mitigating to one global payroll provider? I'll jump in, and then maybe Trevor, you also have something to say about this. I think the difference, and this is something we've also talked about in previous webinars and in our content, is that we're talking about two different models. We're talking about software versus services, right? The benefit of using taking a software approach to this is time, cost, and flexibility. What I mean by this, it's a lot cheaper to implement only software versus acquire or sign a contract with a service provider who is going to essentially manage your payroll for you or deliver your payroll for you, was a more accurate way to say it. we're talking about 20 to 50% less in some cases. So that is a significant difference in cost. The other big difference is in time. Implementing a software solution on top of your existing network of providers is something that you can do on a scale of weeks to months, typically. So we have an example. We actually have a case study on this on our website, which I can share with you if you want, of one of our customers. They are present in, I want to say, 17 countries. They have, I think it's 1,400 employees. I can't remember the exact numbers right now. But basically what happened is they rolled out our entire solution in 3 weeks because it was a software implementation only. So our team trained their global payroll team on how to use the solution. We set up the first countries with them. We set up their different pay groups. We got their data imported and mapped. We showed them how it worked. And then once they learned how to do that, they could do it themselves. And of course, we provide assistance, we provide support, we will help them troubleshoot that and validate it and everything. But they got the whole thing up and running in 3 weeks' time, basically. Yeah. This is in contrast to working with a global aggregator, which is the services model, which is going to take you a scale. It's usually going to be on a scale of months to years in some cases, if you're talking about a gigantic implementation. So yeah, Trevor, maybe you want to add something.
Yeah, I will, because there's different kind of use cases as well. One of the nice flexible or agile things about Payzaar is that you can use as much of or as little of the platform as you want, because we built it in a modular fashion. So we find some of our customers are running out their global payroll contracts, and what they're doing is they're using us for global reporting. So an example would be, perhaps the global reporting that they're receiving today isn't very good because your global provider typically doesn't do things like integrate your in-house payroll where you want to keep that. So you kind of have global reporting for where you have the global provider, but maybe you don't have it everywhere. What Payzaar does is very, very quickly, you can run that out over the top of everything, both the in-house and parts of your payroll landscape that you've outsourced to a global provider. So as you then decide to say, well, look, we might increase, other aspects of Payzaar. We might use reporting, we might use the general ledger journal entry functionality, we might use the employee portal. We have those flexible options as well. So as a lot of people are kind of locked into 3 to 5 year contracts, again, maybe a difference with a differentiator for Payzaar, but to the global providers, like global providers tend to lock you in for a long time. As those contracts start to run out, you can start to put Payzaar in as to pick up parts of your landscape and different modules to augment what you're currently doing today.
Okay. Do we have any other ones? I see that we're actually 2 minutes over time. So if we have one more question, we can take that. And if not, we'll wrap up. Okay. Well, I think we're going to wrap up here. Just to reiterate, we will be sending the recording of the session with you so you can rewatch it and share with anyone you want. We will send you the deck that we've used during the presentation, and we will have more news on our upcoming product launch, which will be 1 month from now. In addition to that, I forgot to mention this earlier, we're going to do a live demo session 2 weeks from now. On the 15th of March, we'll do a more in-depth look into our platform, focusing on these types of features that are related to data management and to drive more efficiency. So when I send you the deck and when I send the video to all of you, I will put the link in there also. So if you want to learn a little bit more, if you want to go a little bit more in depth on these things, you're welcome to join. You can ask more questions then, and you'll get like a more detailed perspective. I think that is it for today. So everyone, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you found it interesting. As I mentioned earlier, if you have any questions, you can reach out to us through our website, or you can contact us through social media. We'd be very happy to talk to you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Take care.